Good morning, and thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here to tell you about what we're doing here in Orange County with our data work, our data training academy, and some of the sessions that we host, including data visualization and data storytelling. So how many of you here are, in fact, from Orange County? Okay, so thank you for your support. So I believe there's also going to be some chat questions that come through, and by all means, let us know when they do. We'll be happy to answer your questions. So let's get started. So first, we're going to start a little bit by telling you about our Data Analytics Training Academy, what it is and what it's not. And so today you're going to get a little bit of a taste of what we offer in that academy with two of our sessions. It's just actually one of our sessions, two topics, data visualization and data storytelling. And so we're going to guide you through with lots of examples, and hopefully you'll get to glean some of, again, what we offer here in Orange County. And of course, then we're going to have closing with some additional time for questions. So we hope you enjoy what we have to offer for today. So as we move towards an increasingly data-driven world, we're starting to see that pretty much data is everywhere. In fact, this slide really represents me running away from all the ads on Instagram that knows exactly what I like, or all the Netflix, I like to watch murder mystery. I saw one and now I can't get my profile to get away from murder mysteries. But pretty much data is everywhere. It's from when we go to get our healthcare, we now have to check in and provide data, at least I know online. It's how we watch television. And it's even pretty much our day-to-day lives, we see that we're surrounded by data. And guess what? Data is also at the courts. So we produce millions of rows of data every year as a court. And in the last few years, I've personally been with the court almost 9 years. There's been a greater emphasis over the data quality and how we use our data. We really, over the last few years, have learned to value data because it provides us information and guidance. And this is evidenced through our data analytics working groups that we have here in California. We have our data summits where we meet about twice a year to discuss what we're doing locally in each of our courts around data and data work. Obviously, we now have new positions around data. I myself, data analyst, right? We also have data scientists in Orange County. And we see through grants supporting innovative technologies that this is very important. And so it's not only in our regular, normal, everyday world, but also in the work that we do. So in Orange County, we do have 5 pillars for our strategic plan, and one of which, of course, is data. We want to be a data-driven court. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that term. But we have done a few things. We do have a data warehouse in place we've had since 2019. And from this data warehouse, we're able to provide information and reporting, I should say, across all litigation types around the areas of our core business there at the court. Oh, do you need me to stand up? Okay, I'm sorry.
They can't see you online.
Oh, it's okay if I'm not seen. Those of you who normally see me in group pictures, you don't. I'm the one running out the door. So can everyone hear me now? Yes. Okay. So essentially what I was saying is we have a data warehouse. We're able to do reports across all litigation types in the areas of filings, hearings, unadjudicated cases, and dispositions. And so that's something that we were very excited to do a few years ago. So we have our curated data ready to go for those reports, again, across all litigation types. We also have a data governance framework. Back in March of 2022, our court formally adopted a data governance plan. I believe it's one of the first in California courts. Don't quote me, but I believe we are. And so that was very exciting. So we have really embraced data, and we've been very forward thinking in using that data to become information for which we are able to make decisions. So we know data is the big buzzword, right? Data, lots of data. I know AI is also coming. That's another new buzzword for us. But people often think data is going to be a solution for everything. And it's not, because quite frankly, it's very complex, right? It can be complex. People can get stuck in the weeds. So while it can provide guidance and direction, we know that other things have to come into play, like our experience or our intuition and other sources of information to make things work. So with the complexity of data, we also understand that it's everywhere, and it's not just for our regular analysts and statisticians, right? We want everyone to be able to use data the best that they can. This doesn't mean everyone is to become an analyst, right? So one of the things we're going to talk to you about when we talk about our Data Analytics Training Academy today, it's not about creating analysts. That's in fact not what it's about at all. It's about reducing that confusion and fear around data understanding, right? It's about being comfortable with and words around data. It's about comfortable being around looking at reports and trying to understand what message we're trying to get from that. So the goal is to create data understanding with the knowledge that it has its limitations, right? It can be complex. It's not going to be a one-stop shop to solve everything. But with our program, the data program, we hope for individuals who come through to be able to harness that information to drive better outcomes. And that's where we came up with our Data Analytics Training Academy. So that's why we're going to start a little bit and give you about history of where that's all about. Okay, so we're here to reduce data confusion. So the Data Analytics Training Academy is a learning program. It was initially supported by the Judicial Council of California, and we worked in close collaboration with National Center for State Courts in developing that curriculum. It is designed for court employees who like to gain skills to understand and effectively use data in court operations. And we'll talk to you a little bit about the 2 tracks that we have available to folks. But again, it's about data understanding and getting over the fear and barriers of data, right? And working with numbers and looking at reports. So as I mentioned, we have 2 tracks that covers 8 topics, 2 of which you're going to get, we're going to an overview today with my colleagues. Overall, we offer 12 sessions, and I'll talk a little bit about what that's about because I do go over that. And then, of course, we do have a present your data story, a presentation at the end where we would like people to show us what they've learned. And so we work closely with the participants so they can tell us and show us if we did a good job, basically, with our academy, right? And I know I see a few faces in here from our academy. I hope it was a good one. If it wasn't, I'll just give you $20 after the class and we'll make it work, All right, so the tracks. We do have 2 tracks, our data practitioner, and this requires a formal application through our human resources. It is a posting that goes out. Ideal participants include those who currently work with data or want to increase their data fluency. Again, comfort, understanding. Not everyone who comes through, like I said, is an analyst. In fact, we get every position I think I've seen come through in the last 2 cohorts that, if they apply, but we get different positions that come through, all the way from a clerk to even people who do work with data in their current role. They're not necessarily analysts, but they do some reporting work in their specific fields. They must attend all 12 sessions. They are in person. We do make them full day sessions. And I'll talk a little bit about how that looks, where we have guided learning in the morning and then, of course, hands-on workshops in the afternoon or more exercises. We do allow up to 15 participants per cohort. In fact, we have cohort 2 starting this Friday. Very exciting, right? I know the team's looking forward to that. And then those individuals who come through our HR process, again, it's solely through HR, they do have the option once they complete all 12 sessions to apply for an apprenticeship opportunity by which they are given a BAT buddy. So we are the business analytic team, we are BAT, and they're given a BAT buddy to go a little bit deeper and to work on real service requests and do a little bit more heavy reporting than maybe the present your data story, which is that presentation I talked about that we asked individuals to do for us a few slides ago. Now, we also want this to be available to everyone, right? We just said we want to make people have better understanding and lose their fear of data. So we have what's called the data consumer, which is, again, you register through Peak, which is our online training system. Forgive me, I know Brian Drinker, who's the head of that system, is here if I said the wrong term. Is that the right description? Okay, wonderful. And they can go in and with the approval of their, again, 8 topics, with the approval of their supervisors, they can sign up to attend a class session. Usually we do a live session in class, and then we have, of course, the virtual that comes through at the same time. So they can join us remotely. They can pick the sessions of interest to them. They don't need to come. It's completely remote. There's no limit on the number of participants, and the apprenticeship option does not apply. Now, I will say, and I didn't get this approved through my director, but I'm going to say it, we do have individuals from other courts who asked to join us remotely or even in class, and are welcome to do so. Because again, why should we keep all this goodness to ourselves? We're here to share with other courts and be of help. So the format, as I mentioned, we are in class and have a remote concurrently going on, a remote option. So there's in-class learning sessions. Then this is obviously the best. That's why we call it participant track. We have usually 3 hours of guided learning, which is again, we have presentation, we go through some activities, and then we try to give you a lot of hands-on activities and exercises that are specific to court, right? We want to give you court examples because that's what we do every day. And really, if we want to drive the point home with an example, it's always nice to tell the story with some court examples, things that we can relate to. Usually we break for lunch and then we do have what's called workshop time. Sometimes we have exercises and sometimes we just allow the individual participants to kind of think about what they want to do for present your data story and work towards getting that ready because it is something that's often new to a lot of these participants. And so we want to give them ample time to take in what we've taught them in the morning and then apply it step by step to their end presentation. And of course, we always want to give additional resources. So luckily, NCSC, I know, and has a lot of wonderful publications. We do offer that. We also have supplemental videos that we built in-house around our curriculum so that individuals can, sometimes repetition is a good thing, right? If we don't say it, if you don't catch on to something one way, maybe through a video and some more examples, we're able to help you in the other. So we try to have them walk away with more to learn on their own time. So here you're really seeing the sequence of taking data, raw data, and making it information. So it's important because when you look at the session titles that I'm going to talk with you about that we offer, it kind of follows this trend, which is what? Which is typically what an analyst would do when we meet with someone. There's a question, usually a business question, an operational question, right? We want to be able to collect data. We work with folks on that business side to collect the data. We prepare it. Meaning we want to make sure it's consistent, it's accurate, it's reliable. We analyze it, right? We want to look for if it is complete. We want to look for its reliability, and we want to glean into what insights it could provide and make sure we have the right information. And then from there we visualize, and you'll see some of that today because you're going to be looking at visualization. Now that can be not just necessarily with advanced business analytical tools such as Power BI and Tableau, which some of you may be familiar with, but as simple as an Excel or even some of the Google Sheets, people are able to create some basic analytics visualizations. And then of course we have to learn how to share that. So this is really the idea when we look at the sequence of sessions we offer, what we had in mind to at least let individuals have some exposure to some of the things like this, so that, again, it increases their data fluency. Now we are in cohort 2. Our first cohort was essentially the folks from our business analytics team, right? We, like I said, built the curriculum in conjunction with NCSC. And the lead instructors have been our director, our analysts, and our data scientists. We have a combination of all 3 within our unit. And we essentially would lead the trainings. And as I mentioned, we also have BAT buddies, which are from us as well, right? We're going to help you, practitioners, in getting through your exercises. And we really, again, wanted to focus around court examples, and we assist with data extraction if needed. So this is more for individuals who are preparing their final report or present your data story. Some of them bring their own data. Some of them ask us for access to data so that we can get that from our case management systems or whatever application it is that they may need, and we assist them with getting the raw data put together. We are so excited to partner with our human resources to be doing our trainings as well. With some of the topics, it really just makes sense to sort of live not only in this training academy, but to live within the organization. So as I mentioned, we have a data governance plan. So wouldn't a training on data governance just make sense to be part of our regular, as we onboard people, right? To let them know, hey, we have a data governance plan. Data is important to us. So that's one. Data ethics is another one. As you know, we go through trainings on ethics regularly here at the court. So why not incorporate data ethics? And I know our organizational lead is back there and agreeing with me, even though he's really not looking at me. He's nodding, yes, Hoda, it makes sense for it to be with HR. So this year we are incorporating some of the folks from our HR department to come and join us and lead those trainings with us, right? And hopefully eventually some of those trainings will live in, like I said, our organization as a whole. So now I'm going to go through the 8 different sessions and just briefly, obviously you have access to these slides, I won't read them through, but we start off with why data analytics, which is what I've just talked with you about, right? It's important, data is important. We need to understand also that everyone in the court has a role to play. Whether you're, for example, in case processing or a clerk entering information, all the way up to a leadership or judicial officer that uses that information to make a decision, right? So every person has a touch point or has an impact on our data. Then we go through data fluency. Now, I will say all of it is really data fluency, right? Because what did I say? I wanted to make us comfortable with information, comfortable with data. But here we're trying to just get individuals able to read, understand, and critically analyze data reports. And as I mentioned, we like to use basic numeracy, basic numbers, basic statistics, if you may, using published reports to convey our message. Of course, data governance and data ethics. We learn why it's important. Not everybody knows that we have a data governance plan. So we try to let them know through this training that it is something that exists within our court. And we want to let them know the importance of having it and what it would mean to not have this data governance plan in place. And then we go through, we identify different types of data and then their roles as well, right? Because that's important. Role of the data steward, data owners. There are data owners. Some people don't even know they're a data owner. Well, guess what? We're going to take that black box and we're going to help you understand that no, there's a lot out there. There is individuals who are essentially responsible ultimately for the quality of that data and maintaining the integrity of the data outside of our court technology folks. And so we describe the role of that data steward, or what, it's an interchangeable word for data owner. And of course, there's limitations with data. And then we also talk about our 10500. We have California Rules of Court. Our 10500 is when we release information, public information requests. I know each state may call it something different. We do quite a bit of those in our unit as well. Data lifecycle. From the minute we decide to define a field or create a field in a case management system, it has a life cycle. That's the beginning, right? We need a field. We need to know what it looks like, how it's used, who has access to it, all the way to the end. Are we going to use it for reporting? Are we going to store it, or are we going to purge it? What are the requirements around that data? So we talk a little bit about the data lifecycle in this particular class. And we learn a little bit more about our databases in Orange County, as well as who can access the data, right? We also have sensitive and confidential data in our world, sealed cases. What do we do with that? Do we have purging requirements, or are we going to retain our data for future use? There are some of the sessions, and this is why I mentioned we have 12 sessions, but 8 topics, because some of them we do really require more than one session to let the individual learn truly what that's all about. And data preparation is one of those sessions. So we follow the principles and steps required to prepare data for use. And we use sample data sets. And this is, I think, also very fun. There's a lot of hands-on here, less theoretical. For example, data governance, data ethics, more theoretical. Data prep, a lot of hands-on, right? And the idea is data on its own is great. Information is great, but it has to be information that will allow you or allow the person who's reading the report to take some sort of action, right? So for example, if you're doing a weather report and it says it's going to rain, well, that's a clue in that report that maybe I should take the action of wearing a jacket or taking an umbrella, right? So there's actionable insights. So we try to teach the practitioner here how to analyze data in effective ways, but in resulting in an action, right? Because information by itself is great, but is it going to help me is the question. And so we do describe what an actionable insight is. Not always an easy thing. It's one of those terms that are very exciting, but I think a little bit harder to, sorry, I'm going a little bit faster. And of course, data visualization and data storytelling, which also is taught in 2 sessions. You're going to get an overview today. And that's essentially all of our 8 sessions. I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Nicole, and she's going to talk about data visualization and data storytelling. So,
sorry about that. We are a really stacked deck, so I want to make sure that we share everything that we have with you today. Data viz and storytelling is a segment of our curriculum. And so the curriculum itself was designed by data practitioner for data practitioners. So for the consumer in the room, welcome. So we'll be talking about you, right? Specifically, because how you consume the data that we produce for you. So there are 4 key considerations when it comes to data storytelling, right? Data, we won't spend much time on this subject at all today, but I will say that we do need quality and accurate data to kind of get the engine running, because that's like 95% of the effort here. So for the rest of our time today, I'm gonna talk about the last 5% of what we do. So Hoda's piece earlier talked about, a couple sessions dedicated to data prep. So that's actually very important. So we'll just talk about the other subject at all. What is this? So first things first, the audience. Who's your audience? This is a bit not, okay. So what are their needs, right? So what are your business questions? That's everything that we do in analytics with a specific audience in mind. And because it doesn't matter what we think, how great we are, how brilliant we are, right? Because none of our work really matters. It's not for us. This is specifically for you guys, the consumer, the decision maker, because none of us, create data for ourselves because we don't make decisions generally. So we want to make sure that our audience, the decision maker, gets the report that is clear, clutter-free, and easy to understand. So when we design, when we visualize data, we are actually synthesizing the quantitative information into shapes, colors, size, positions, whatever you can think of, so that the consumer can take that and decode it into information, right? So as consumer, your job is to take what we provide for you and try to figure out how to make actions out of that. So what happens when someone's eyes meet your creations? So what happens, does their mind react to the design that was offered? So to understand what makes a design works, we need to talk a little bit about the psychology behind the human perceptions. Specifically, some cognitive bias we develop as human. So for example, right, associating colors, blue, male, pink, female, red, over budget, orange, great, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. I need a volunteer from the room. Just do some really quick thing. What's your name? Can you read what you have on the screen for me?
Yellow, black, red, green, blue, red, yellow, black, yellow, red, green, red, black, green, blue, green, yellow, red.
Perfect. One more volunteer. Behind you.
Who raised their hand?
Thanks so much. Can you say the color that you see and not the written words or text?
Okay. Purple, green, burgundy, yellow, green, yellow, black, orange, yellow, purple, black, burgundy, I guess, purple, orange, pink, yellow, orange, black, green.
Yay. Good job. So what do you think happened there? So what happened if I asked the third person to read it from the bottoms up, or from right to left? Right? It's not natural. I didn't ask any of the readers to actually read from left to right, but that's naturally what we were taught to do. Unless you're in the 5 countries in the world that read from top to bottom, right to left, we tend to read information from left to right, top to bottom, right? So the gist of this is to not design against the grain, right? Just don't go against what people already know. Right or wrong, that's what we just know. And so our piece is just trying to offer information in the way that people already flow in information, in their mind. So fundamentally, we tend to order our experience in a manner that is recognizable to us, right? Our brain is wired to understand structure, logic, patterns. And so this is what allows us to create meaning in what we see. And so, one step back. In the 20s, right, there's a group of German psychologists developed theories around, perception, how we perceive information, how we process things that we see. And so they tend to believe that when we look at things, we try to look at things in totality. We don't look at things as elements of it. So as an example, if someone was to walk through that door right now and look at this room, they said, what do they see? Probably a presentation of sorts going on, right? They don't look at this and say, there's male, there's female, there are chairs, there's a projector. We don't process information that way. In a matter of a second, we know what is going on in this room. So when we're trying to make sense of the world, that's kind of the school of thoughts. Things are looking at totality. So instead of our minds tend to perceive things as elements of the whole, so we can get through the information that's complex for us. So with that, just a couple examples. Yell it out. What do you see? Exactly, right? So triangles That's exactly what it is, because that's what we see. The reality is it is graphics of 3 Pac-Mans placed in very specific positions, right? What do you see? Orange, great, but yes, what do we see? How about now? Do you it feels like you're in the optometrist's office, right? A or B, or is it C, what's better? So there's a principle that basically say, things that are close together appear to be more related than things that are further apart. So with that in mind, let's look at this again. What do we see? One group, related components, yeah? And this second one, 2 different groups, difference between the 2 groups, but they're related. What about this? Do you see rows? Do you see columns? Some people see rows, but most of us see columns because the proximity between those dots and column dimensions are closer together, right? It overrides the row aspect of things. So in this kind of sense, we tend to, group things that look alike together. So we tend them to think that they have the same functions as well. And so again, this concept, rows or columns. Columns. What do we see here? Columns and 3 different groups, right? And this specific one, the proximity of these dots are so close together they overwrites the color aspect of it. So these are things that you kind of have to think about, as designer, to keep the principle of that in mind. So without really kind of illustrating that piece, the proximity and the similarity, looking at this thing, you don't even have to have legend. You can relate right away. The electric green, the blue, hybrid, right? So those are the things you want to kind of keep in mind as you're designing piece. And you aim to form an instant association between the data and the labeling what you have in front of you. So, viz. What is a viz? To simply define, a viz is a picture format of your data, right? So there are 2 significant use cases in creating charts. Why we create charts? Exploratory analytics. This is for you, the practitioner. This is for you to explore your data. Visualize it real quick to see if you have missing component, missing dates, is it complete, there's something wrong with the structure of the data, is the right or correct. So this doesn't have to be nice and clean and pretty. It just have to be quick and dirty and be done with it. Explanatory data analytics, this is for your consumer, right? So this is intended to convey a message to them. So here you need to be on point. Design and details matter. So this is where we need to spend our time perfecting. So the number 1 objective of the viz is what? To above all else, show the data, right? You must show the data. So in order to show the data, you gotta have the right chart type. So how many chart type do you know that you can name of? I bet you can spit out a bunch right now. Line, graph, bar, pie, Sankey, things I can't even pronounce, right? But have you really thought about the granularity of those graphics? What are the building blocks? And more specifically, how are they perceived by your consumer? So in the 80s, there was a couple of researchers from AT&T. They were really troubled by the unscientific manner in which, data was being presented in chart form. So they created a series of tests to focus on the readability to decode the message based on the data was presented in front of them, the graphic chart that was used. So they identify a set of building blocks for viz, such as position, length, area, size, color, and determine that the different visual coding that you provided have different level of difficulties for the audience to decode. So with that, in the scale so they rank these building blocks, from the most accurate, from the top, all the way down to the bottom, in terms of effectiveness in using as chart. A lot of us like to use, 3D graphics, and you see what the 3D lands right at the bottom. It's not really great to talk about that. So let's go through a couple of these things to get an idea of how these perceptual tasks were about and how they were tested. Position, comma, scale, right? So they actually just drew a vertical line and then 2 dots and say, which is higher, A or B, right? Pretty easy. And then they ask, in terms of looking between the magnitude between those things. So everyone in the group, the test group, did really well. So in this kind of thing, when you look at your graphics, your bar chart, your line chart are actually the most accurate information. That might be boring to your reader sometimes, but they're the most accurate in conveying the information. And then that's the application as bar chart, dot chart, line chart. Line chart is a bunch of dots connected, right? Same concept. Length. So they drew 2 lines, Easy to tell which one's longer, which one's shorter, right? Pretty easy task. Then they asked the questions, this is a common starting point. Which is longer, the magnitude? If the longer line was 10, can you guess what a shorter line looked like? Maybe 9, right? Pretty accurate. People do really well with that. Applications of bar chart. And then they created something different, and they have the line start at a different point. Now you ask the question, which is longer, which is shorter? They can still do pretty well, but less accurate than the other one if they have a common line, right? So if I were to ask, who's taller, myself or my colleague Day? We can't tell when he's sitting down, I'm standing up, right? It's easy to tell if we're both standing from the common line. So in this kind of sense, your people love stack bars too. Stack bars only good if it's only 2 levels. Beyond that, there's a bunch of lines. It drives me insane when I look at that, because what can you tell from that except your love for colors, right? Nothing else, right? And so in that kind of aspect, use those things very, very kind of like, I don't know, just be careful when it comes to this stuff. And just one more example. How about this? Which is the biggest slice? Pie chart. Who say A? Who said B? Well, how about D? G? So variations of different answer, right? So many answers out there probably demonstrate the effectiveness of a pie chart. And it gets worse when you see something like this, right? People love making things for 3Ds. And this 3Ds actually, and with the angle, switch. So now I make it look like E is the biggest slice. And it's the same data that you see here, right? So D and E now become completely different, but they almost look the same on this side. So if your objective is to confuse and to trick people, 3Ds, animation, throw at it. And Fenrir will talk a little bit more about, kind of different degrees of this. There's a joke in my team. We talked about, friends don't let friends make pie charts. So it's very, very little use in this team. And if we're gonna use it, there are responsibility to use it. So we'll definitely go through those steps with you. And so above all else, show the data. So let's go back to this real quick, right? Think about your design. How much ink on the chart is actually dedicated to showing the data, right? Have you seen a design where you see all kind of things? Because we're going to use everything that's available as a tool. If it's not dedicated to showing the data, then it's probably not needed. So that's your color background, your grid line, your duplicates labeling. You're labeled on the axis. You got to label on the bar again. You don't need to do both, one only, right? 3D effects. So think about it in that kind of manner. If it's not showing the data, it's junk. It's not needed, right? Take a look at that. And to think about that in that kind of ratios, you want to think about, how much ink is dedicated to showing the data versus the total ink of your entire presentation. Then you can just backtrack from there. So I'll leave you with that, and I'll get rid of the junk, and then let's get to the data.
Awesome. I think I'm on. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I'm here just to continue the conversation from my colleagues. So what makes a good data visualization? So a good data visualization can say many things. With the perfect choice or the appropriate visual, we're able to get our information across. It can deliver valuable information if presented properly. For example, if we want to highlight certain things, we could use that by color, by font, display, and allow the reader to make data actionable just through a visual. So as we mentioned, we don't want to include too many things in the visual. We want the reader to basically get what? The data. So we want them to be excited about our visuals, but we want them to gather what it is that we're actually trying to present. So here what we have is the same data set presented in two different ways. We have a table and we have a line chart. So which one is easier to understand at a glance? Line chart, right? So we can easily see quickly that this is a representation of both filings and dispositions, and we're able to see clearly, easily that basically both are in a downward trend. We could also gather that information from the table, but instead of having the reader go through the table, trying to make sense of the data, trying to assess a pattern perhaps, they could easily see the information as well in a line graph. It also has the ability for the reader to absorb the information in the shortest amount of time. And also too, when you're creating visuals, you definitely need to know who your audience is. We talked about audience, the importance of who you're creating the report for. So you need to find out or know if how they're ready to consume data. I produce data for various people. Some people want a fancy dashboard. Other people just want a simple table. So not knocking the table, but it is a little bit more difficult for the reader to grasp information. And again, we want to just to grasp the information as soon as possible. And also too, with this, the line graph here, properly labeled, people should be able to get information with the visual alone. It doesn't need additional references. It doesn't need, you don't need like a dictionary or anything to explain anything further. Everything is self-explanatory, basically just through the visual. So again, we definitely need to consider our audience. Who is your audience? What questions do they have? And do you have enough data? Oftentimes people come to us and assume that we have all the data, or assume that we have all the answers. In our team, we're very lucky. We have people that extract data directly from CMS, which is fantastic. We have that readily available. We have others like myself that just build stuff on stuff that's been extracted. And so a lot of times you have to explain and sit down with your audience and take a minute to see what are your expectations, what are you looking to gain from the report or the visual, and you need to let them know of any data limitations. Oftentimes people don't know what's in our data. They assume that everything is included there, and sometimes we need to step back and kind of take a look at that and determine whether we have the data available for us to answer their questions, or perhaps we need to go back to the CMS and extract some data. So those things are all important things that you need to ascertain as you start creating your visuals. So yes, so if possible, of course, as a requester for the data comes to you, they're coming to you with a problem, that is the time that you ask questions as to what they expect and vice versa. Oops, sorry. So using the right chart or the graph for the job. Based on the audience and the type of data, what type of graphs would be best to represent your findings? For example, in the previous visual, we were showing filings and dispositions over time. Obviously, if you're displaying information over time, a line graph would be best. If you are showing perhaps a proportion of a category, use a pie chart. That's one example of something that you could use to represent proportion of a total. But the point here is to make the data easy for the reader to understand and to get the message clearly from any visual that you prepare. What we have here is a snapshot of one of our dashboards. This is our court-wide hearings held dashboard. As the title states, this is a dashboard for hearings held court-wide. So that is very important. Make sure your titles, we touched on that earlier, they are self-explanatory. Labels that you use throughout your dashboard, everything should be pretty much intentional in your dashboard. I know that we talked here briefly about how we consume data. So notice here that the eye is drawn to like the donut chart at the upper left-hand corner of the page. Since we are displaying hearings held court-wide, it makes sense to show the workload by litigation type first. As Nicole mentioned, most people read consume data in the same way, like in a Z pattern format, your visuals should follow that format as well, trying to understand how the consumer will take in that information. We're able to see here on the next visual that we do have hearings held, again by litigation type, and we do have pre and post disposition. Here we went ahead and added a legend, but the use of color easily tells us which of those hearings, which of that workload happened before it was disposed, and what part of that workload happened after they were disposed. The bottom graph here, of course, is properly labeled. You'll see that your totals are highlighted in a different color. They're bolded along with the litigation type. Again, these are things we want to call out in our visuals so that it makes the reader easily able to understand the data. So as we mentioned, a good data visualization definitely needs to focus on the key message. The visualization should focus on what the target audience is looking to gain from your story. Everything in your dashboard, your key metrics should be properly labeled by a legend, title, distribution. I'm referring to like a bar, like if size and width. And of course, the color. You could give lots of information with a lot of these formatting guidelines. In addition, it needs to be simple. We don't want to overwhelm the reader with too much information on either a visual or an entire dashboard. For example, the previous dashboard, I don't know if you know, it was 3 visuals only. So we don't want to add more than 4 or 5. It's just too much for the consumer to take in. So we don't want to overwhelm them. In addition, is your data cherry picked? What do I mean by that? We need to show visuals that show an accurate picture of the data that you're representing, instead of only showing perhaps a portion that might be deceitful to the reader and perhaps steer them in the wrong direction. So what do I mean by that? So for example, here, we see a graph that shows dispositions decreasing due to COVID. So it kind of makes sense, right? We all know what happened during COVID. It makes sense that everything kind of was slow or out during that time period. So it kind of makes sense to see that, okay, dispositions were down during COVID. However, upon a closer look or a more expanded date range of the data, we're able to see that it's on a downward trend. So it wasn't specific to COVID. It's mostly concise with previous years, and it's on par with disposition levels. So that's what I mean by not specifically focusing on one area that might steer the direction elsewhere. We have to kind of see like the whole picture and be able to capture that all within your visual. As Nicole mentioned, visualizations need to be simple. Too many colors are not a good idea when it comes to a dashboard. A dashboard is not a place for you to come and explore your artistic side and start adding colors galore. Color has to be intentional. For example, profits and gains, we could depict that in green. Perhaps losses, over budget, under budget, could be depicted in red. So those are the key metrics that we should focus on to bring the information to the reader easily and quickly. So for example here, this is a nice looking dashboard. However, it doesn't tell us anything. It's too many colors. It's a nice color palette. However, it doesn't tell us anything. The color is not intentional. So do not use blended color schemes. Try to use colors that are within like the normal palettes. Here, although it looks pretty, it's a bit much. And a couple of things to point out here. So we're seeing dispositions by year. The color doesn't tell us anything other whether they're where they are compared to other years. But one thing to notice here too is the axis line here. For example, it takes a half a second to look at this and see that we're looking at thousands. This is not properly formatted. Make sure that if you use numbers, they're formatted. Add a comma here we need to intuitively read the value instead of taking a second to figure out, oh, is that 10 to hundreds, thousands. So here, and this also plays a little bit. Anytime you're using like percentages, currency, make sure that's labeled properly. You don't want the reader to be confused. Oftentimes we include percentages and we put decimals. Get rid of decimals unless they're intentional. Just round it all up to a nice number and then just make sure you properly label that. So again, confuse the reader, no. Clutter the reader, no. Just pertinent information, simple, and to the point. Also, too, if you're providing numbers, of course, which is what we normally do, you do not want the reader doing any math. So you definitely want to, for example, if you are presenting a table such as this. So here we have just a very simple table that illustrates our traffic court trials. It's by month and by justice center. These are the different justice centers that we have in Orange County: Central, Harbor, North, and West. I call those out because it's going to come into play a little bit in the presentation. So here we see that, of course, this is just 6 months of data that we're showing, but we have a total column. We also have the totals by month. So we're able to see the information by Justice Center. We're able to see the information monthly. One thing that people don't normally ask, but we always like to throw in as an added bonus, is a monthly average. Eventually the question does come up once they get the workload. They're like, oh, what does the monthly average look like? So whether for us in criminal, whether they request that or not, we just add it as an added bonus because this is all information that they need. And again, by providing averages, I said percentages and so forth, you are eliminating the need for the reader to do math. If your reader is having to do extra research to understand your visual, you have failed in some way because your visual should stand alone on them with the information that you're providing. A good data visualization is clear. If you are using access lines, as I mentioned, they should ask perspective. They should be large enough for you to see, for the audience to see. For example, in Nicole's previous example of the sales of electric and hybrid vehicles, in that instance, we saw that it wasn't necessarily, there wasn't a need for a legend. We were able to see the type of vehicle was with the line color, so we were able to show the differentiation with the color without having to add an additional agenda. Here, for example, our values in logical expected order. What do I mean by that? In operations, in criminal, we are constantly providing data reports, and it's based on those justice centers that I called out earlier. They are always in that expected order: Central, Harbor, North, and West. Everything we provide is in that order. If I were to switch it, or if I were to switch a justice center, that will cause confusion, at least in a court, because it will definitely not be something that they're easily able to consume. So that again goes down to, do you know your audience, the data, and making sure that you know what they're expected. Is your data accessible? Sometimes, if you're aware, you might be in the know of somebody that might have some limitations with your data. So if you're aware of that, please consider those limitations and modify accordingly. Most data visualization tools have a colorblind palette, or you can get a color palette just through a simple search. Here is an example. So someone who is not colorblind might see this chart. The original image is pretty clear, nice colors. However, somebody with that is colorblind might see it's the same information, but to them it appears all distorted. So again, if you're aware of that in your audience or of any other limit, this is just one specific, modify your report and provide it accordingly. Is your data credible? First of all, here we have this little bar line is something that we incorporate in most of our dashboards. It includes the data source. You'll find often than not, you are recreating data for something that you've already prepared. If you cite your source, if you are asked to produce that again later on, you're able to go back to the source without recreating the wheel. We always put our contact information. You want to let know who prepared the report. You want to use proper pagination. If you have a multi-page report, make sure that you title that accordingly. If a page is loose, it should be able to stand on its own without, again, additional references. So if it's multi-page a report, if you're preparing a report, make sure it's paginated. And also to add a date of creation. That again, that's just for yourself, because again, most likely you will be preparing this data in one way or another, and you do not want to be reinventing the wheel every single time. Last but not least, is to test it. Have individuals from the audience tested your visual or your dashboard. So now you have all your data, you have your visuals ready. Now we need to know if the finished product is what was requested. If possible, as I mentioned, you're asking questions as you're creating these reports, you're working with your target audience to ensure you're meeting their needs, that you know that you're on the right track. Continually revisit that original question that first prompted the report in the first place. And so if your requester, the audience, is able to answer their questions with your report or even through one of your visuals, then you can consider your data storytelling journey a success. So now I will hand this over to Fenru, who will go into more detail as to what we just talked about.
Thank you, Lupe. So Nicole shared with you some of the concept, the science behind the cognitive process of the data visualization. And Lupe shared with you some of the characteristic of the good data visualization. I'm going to share with you some of the options that we commonly use and what kind of basic rules we employ in our unit when creating those charts. So these are the 4 charts we're going to go through today. We're going to go through bar chart, stack bar chart, line chart, and pie chart. The first one we're going to go through is the bar chart. It's the most commonly used chart, and it can display information vertically and horizontally. And it's best to use when you're trying to show the frequency of your data. It's used to, you can use it to compare the categories in a single measure. And it's very easy to read. When it comes to bar chart, there are some basic rule we use in our unit. We always wanted to anchor the scale at 0. Remember Nicole mentioned that in the perception task that we use the position to display information. So bar chart is that kind of chart using the position to the axis to display information. So you wanted to make sure you anchor your scale at 0. So your chart is not going to have any kind of misrepresentation. And you want to use the same scale in the side-by-side bar chart. Unless it's necessary, try to avoid the dual axis. The reason being that the whole point of data visualization is you want to get your point across to the audience in the shortest amount of time. So in the dual axis, even though it displays interesting information, but you're asking your reader to compare from the left to right, the two axes to get the information. So take the graph on the right, for example, that's a use of dual axis, and your reader actually have to compare the 2 axes to know the different measure between the line and bar graph. So it will take them a little bit longer to get the information. And you want to sort the data in a logical way. If you want to call the highest number to your reader's attention, sort it that way, highest to lowest. But if your judicial officer is used to seeing the data in a certain way, like they wanted to see the chambers work on the top of the chart alphabetically, sort it that way, help them to get the information they wanted. And you wanted to either label the graph or the scale, but not both. Remember Nicole mentioned that you wanted to make sure you convey the information in the most efficient way. So only including the essential in your graph. You save the reader the time to look at all the points that you put on the graph. That way they can use the least processing time to get the information. And the last one is that you want to make sure the gaps between the bars is consistent. Remember, we process the information by proximity and similarity, that like the graph of the column that grouping exercise we just did, the gap between the bar is working the same way. So you want to make sure the gaps are consistent. We use a lot of dashboard in our unit. So if your color is representing a certain category in your dashboard, help your reader by carrying the same color scheme throughout so they can quickly make the association like pink is 22-23 fiscal year. Also, we want to label the chart with the horizontal label. The point is that we are reading the information from left to right horizontally in the Z pattern. So unless your reader is used to read the information like this, save their neck, please. And the next one is the kind of leveraging our cognitive bias. Try to avoid using all caps. When we're reading a text in all caps, we're thinking people are yelling at us, even though it's just a graph. And also, you want to make sure your graph is legible. Use at least 10-point font so they don't have to bust out a magnifier. And if the numbers are large, save some space by summarize, like 1 with 60 behind it takes more space than 1 with M to representing 1 million. And use two-dimensional chart. Aside from Nicole's horror story about the 3D pie chart, I'm going to show you a different example here. So this is a bar chart gone wrong, right? We use the position to the axis to display information. I am going to draw your attention to the first blue bar where it says Tom. You notice that the data label says 45, but if you compare it to the axis next to it, it looks like closer to 40, right? And the one behind it, the red one, the data label shows 11, but it looks so below the 10. And also that 3D bar chart has the deficiency of letting you see everything on the chart, right? There are some bars hidden behind it. You couldn't even see it. And this chart is also not labeling or arranging in a logical way. You don't know whether it's by person, by region, or it's by north, south, east, west. We don't know. So overall, it's just a messy chart and you require your reader to do a lot more to get your point across, right? So avoid it. The next one is stack bar chart. It's similar to the bar chart. It's also displaying information vertically or horizontally. And it's best to use when you wanted to display information in proportion or the progress to a benchmark. So the graph on the right shows the proportion of cases with hearing schedule and no future hearing by case type. Since the stack bar chart uses the area within the bar to display information, help your reader by using contrasting color. And because we also use the color to establish the baseline between the bar to get the information across, try to avoid using more than 2. And the graph on the right is an example of bad choices of the color because it's not contrasting, and also stacking more than 2 because it's harder to establish the baseline between the bar. You notice that Asia, South America, and North America are all in the similar color. You couldn't really tell, right? The next one is the line chart. Line chart is best used when your data element has a sequence of happening, or we call it a time series. You know, it happened through times. It's ideal to compare the trend through time. And when it comes to line chart, is that you wanted to avoid crowding your data visualization by displaying more than 5. And you want, similar to the bar chart, you want to anchor the vertical axis to 0 and get rid of the chart junk by labeling either the scale or the graph, but not both, because you notice that you're constantly referencing back and forth to every data point when you look at the chart on the right. And use the even interval on the axis. You notice at the bottom of the x-axis, it jumped from April 07 to January 09. That just gives you the impression that this data is cherry-picked and makes you doubt the accuracy, right? And the next one is that if your data has the benchmark or a target, use that information sparingly. For example, the chart on the right shows the sales over time, that the green representing that it reached the target and the red representing that's benchmark. But if you wanted to get your point across and let your reader notice that what months we reached the target and what months we fell below the benchmark, if I'm the person who's preparing this graph, I would just highlight the highest one in green and then lowest one in red. And I don't label anything else. So the reader can know distinctively that those are the 2 months that you want to call to their attention. The last one is the pie chart. It's best used to display the proportion, and one of the variation to pie chart is donut chart. Donut chart is just the pie chart without the center. And because when it comes to pie chart, you want to make sure that you don't include more than 6 categories, because everybody wants a slice of pie, right? You don't want it just a little sliver. So you want to make sure that you have enough real property in that pie for everyone, every category that you wanted to show. And please make sure, if you really wanted to use pie chart, make sure the number is added to 100. Don't make sure that's the base math you wanted to do. Make sure, always check. And you want to label the slice directly so they don't have to referencing back and forth between the pie slice and the legend. Now we went through the 4 basic chart type. I'm going to share with you some of the other type of data visualization. So the first one is a table. When it comes to data viz, you won't think table is a way as a data viz, but if you add the color component to it, table can be a very useful way to display information. Like this table, you notice that your eyes automatically drawn to the later part of the year. You know your most sales is in the months of September to December, and chair has the most sale in months of December. And you can get all that information just by looking at color. And okay, so we're running out of time, so I'm just going to go through this one and I'm going to hand over to Lupe. So the next one is the scatter plot. Scatter plot use the position between x-axis and y-axis to display information, and bubble chart is a variation of the scatter plot. It adds the size of the bubble to the data element display. So I'm going to hand it over to Lupe for summary.
For that, the information's in the packet. You can actually get it from the line. We condensed a 3-hour session down to 70 minutes, as much as we can, but we're gonna wrap it up a little bit and some of the options. So please look at that online as well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, on again? Okay, so as we mentioned, we're trying to pack a lot of information into one presentation. So we talked about data, audience, visualization. So we'll finalize with narrative. We will talk about the narrative and the things to consider when addressing. They should be in your narrative. We talked about the intended audience, the objective, of course, data source. One thing I didn't mention is frequency. As you sit with your audience, your reader, You need to know how they're going to get that information. Is it going to be a dashboard? Is it going to be an Excel PDF? Is it going to be distributed monthly, quarterly? So those are the things that you definitely need to be aware of. Here, this is just kind of general best practice, things that we've discussed in the example. We talked about the Z pattern, how we read. We talked about labeling, legends, pagination, all those good things that will make your visuals stand out more for the reader. Again, this is just additional information. Remember, don't clutter your visuals. We do not want junk in your dashboards. If you're using abbreviations, please make sure that we love acronyms here at the course. Spell them out, add a footnote to ensure that they are understanding what you are presenting. And again, overall formatting. These are simple things that will make your visual that much greater. These are not rules. Almost in our team, but they're not rules they're just guidelines that are strongly encouraged to and highly recommended for any successful data visualization and storytelling journey. And with that, that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for your time. As we mentioned,
we do have a few minutes for questions. Is there a question online?
Yeah, we have a question online from Karma. Are you willing to share your data governance policy?
Yes, all those are, good Lord. All those are shareable, and just message us your information and we can definitely share that. I'm not sure broadly yet, but I think specifically, and we definitely share that.
So, general question, did you guys uncover and have to deal with any data quality issues as you embarked on this? And can you share maybe a few things that came to light for you?
Data quality for us actually came about when we built the data warehouse. And so that's actually an everyday effort for us, right? So I think part of that is about, quality and accuracy is two different things, right? You can have quality bad data, right? Meaning you're consistently collecting something that you know that's wrong. You don't know that. The quality and the accuracy, those things, two things you have to consider. Is the information using the same way it was collected? And sometimes not. So our effort, not in this creating this program, but in actually building a data warehouse, we reveal a lot of that. So
Great, thank you.
we definitely can share that too if you want those kind of journey as well.
What are some of the strategies that you use when your charts are borderline too many options on a chart? So like you said, you don't want to see 1,000 lines on a line, or on a bar chart.
Yeah.
So when you start to feel like it's getting to be too much, what are some of the strategies you use to make that better? Or do you just turn it into a table?
Others work great, right? So in terms of we talked about, the pie chart is a good one. You don't want 1,000 different ones. People consume things, 6, 7 things. This is the reason why your phone number is only 7-digit, right? You can recall certain things. So you want to kind of roll them up as you can, because beyond certain kind of distributions become less relevant. Unless you're looking for the least distributed amount category, you can actually just, take the last 10, whatever, roll them up as others. I think that's one of the ways to do that. And so the table works well, right? I'm not knocking tables. We love tables. We have a lot of managers who wants us to go back into inventory and get tables out of there. But the problem with table is that it doesn't reveal a lot of trends for you. So, if the idea is for you to see every single category, tables works really great. But if you're just talking about, visualizing categories and trends immediately, roll those up into a smaller category and then you can go from there. I think you can do both. So,
I have a question. I guess I've had the experience where sometimes I receive a report and it's a lot of information that just says this is who we serve, but it lacks any comparison information, kind of the things that would help paint a picture or create the narrative. And I wonder, is there any principle? I mean, certainly there is raw data, there are this many people in this specialty program, these are their demographics, but is there any principle in terms of what percentage of your report can just be raw information and what part of it really needs to demonstrate either change over time and things like that? Does that make sense?
Yes. So I think that you touch on a really good point. Comparison is a big one, right? What if I just state the statement, I am tall? Is that a true statement? Right. Well, but who are you comparing me to?
Maybe.
So if you compare me to Mike Dunn sitting in the room, right, versus Van Root, I am tall. So the comparison value makes sense, right? So if you just put the number on there, you're correct. Sometimes it lacks context. So it does make best sense to compare yourself to the number to the month before, the year before, the fiscal year before, whatever those elements is, you have to add those different context. If you just simply just want to see the numbers, don't spend the time doing the graph, right? It doesn't make sense. The graphic is to show the data. If the data is already known, don't show it again. Who cares, right? So that's the piece to illustrate. As far as raw data, right? Raw data mean to us, what comes out of the system. It's like a baby, dirty, not really trained, doesn't really know what to do. You gotta kind of clean it up a little bit. You gotta prep it before someone see it. So the concept of raw data doesn't really apply for us, but if you're talking about just illustrating something in a list form, right? I think that's appropriate, but that could be like a list, a table of some sort. And you can do a mixture of both. Typically what we like to do is do a summary data in the front and then give them the roster in the back. And I think that's appropriate, right? So.
Any other questions? We have time for a couple more. I don't see a hand.
There's one hand up here.
When are there too many slicers on a page? Like everybody likes to have a slicer, but when can you do the job instead by just a nice summary page that gives you a depictive graph instead of putting all the various slicers on the page that people can manipulate? And then, you can confuse yourself with the slicers.
Yeah, you do. And you want to build yourself a little button that said reset, right? Because otherwise it's like back and back. I think, that's two different things. You're talking about interactive dashboard reporting, where slicer is important. I think, the slicer important for me is like when you know your audience. If they like to play around the data, put things that they can naturally slice with, right? Most of the time, our judges, our managers, this is great, give me a PDF, right? And that kind of concept, it doesn't really apply, because if you PDF something that has built-in slicer and filter that allows you to do interactiveness with it becomes less valuable, right? So I think it depends on the format in which you started with. It's the design of the person. Give me a PDF format. Give me 3 bullets on an email, right? So those things in itself, you got to produce what is needed immediately. And the slicer, I think if the information's on the graphic already, don't put the slice for that. Meaning you can click on the Justice Center by the graph. There's no filter needed, right? Sometimes the duplicativeness of this is too much. So maybe that could help you with your crowdedness of too many slicer. Yeah, if that helps.
Any questions from our online group? No? Okay. I really appreciated this presentation. You guys did an excellent job. It's very practical information. There's such good data that can come out of court. It's sometimes hard to know which piece of data is worth sharing with your audience and which piece of data is just good for us data geeks.
Right. Just because we have it doesn't mean we have to show it, right?
Yeah,
so we
good advice. I should put that on my desk.
We can tell you how many people have brown eyes at the court, but is it relevant to anyone, right? Just because you have it, don't illustrate it unless someone needs it.
So. Right. That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming.